Best and worst retro cars. What are the best and worst retro cars ever made? In a car industry where technology seems to move ever onward at a frightening pace, manufacturers often decide to break the cycle and look to the past for inspiration. The resulting retro cars play into the heritage of the car brand, our own sense of nostalgia, and often gather a loyal enthusiast following. Below, our team has picked out the retro cars that we think have done the best job, as well as the ones that fell short of the mark. The best retro cars. Ford Mustang GT. Ford knows how to make a muscle car, and the Mustang is a model that has remained fairly true to its roots. A reboot in 2005 saw it take retro lines and contours from the original 60s design, revitalizing the look of the modern-day muscle car in the process. The firm has opted for an evolution of this design ever since, with each generation clearly maintaining its DNA. And the 2024 Mustang GT is the best one yet. Thunderous V8 power and a surprisingly well-honed chassis make the Mustang more than a one-trick pony, and strong residuals reflect that. The Mustang may be a dying breed, but it's a wonderful driver's car and a refreshing alternative choice in Ford's current lineup. Singer Porsche 911. The entire Porsche 911 lineage could have had a spot on this list, but the ultimate retro-styled, modern tributes to the legendary sports car's forebears are those reimagined by Singer. The classic turbo is based on the 964 generation 911 that's been rebodied in carbon fiber to look almost identical to the 930 turbo from the 70s and 80s. Being a Singer, every surface and detail has been subtly refined to accentuate the shape. The same goes for the interior. While the 3.8-liter twin-turbo flat-six produces up to 510 bhp, yet it is still air-cooled like the 911s of old, and that power is sent to the beautifully dished rear wheels via a 6-speed gearbox. Volkswagen ID, Buzz. Some cars take a while to reach production, but the Volkswagen ID, Buzz's yawning 22 years between initial concept and showroom-ready road car, could be a sign that the company knew it couldn't afford to get it wrong. The ID, Buzz coincides with a period of financial trouble for the German giant, driven by production delays and software issues that its EVs encountered in the wake of Dieselgate. That mean the ID, Buzz needed to be pretty much perfect, and it is. The vibrant VW has a design that transcends retro, tapping into the very culture that the brand has created with generations of iconic vans. Just as the new Beetle did at the turn of the century, let's hope that the ID, Buzz has the same restorative effect on Volkswagen. Alpine A110. At a time when cars are growing ever taller, wider, and fatter, lightweight sports cars become more appealing with every passing day. At roughly 4.2 meters long, the Alpine A110 is about the same length as a Volkswagen Golf, but at 1.8 meters wide, it's narrower. These compact dimensions, along with a curb weight of around 100 kgs, make the Alpine feel tiny on the road, allowing you to make the most of its glorious chassis. Then there's the looks. The A110 has taken much of its inspiration from its retro namesake and predecessor, from the four-headlight arrangement at the front to the tapered rear end with slim taillights. It's a fantastic reimagination. Mini Cooper, I don't care what my colleagues say. The modern Mini Cooper is the best retro remake ever. It shocked the industry when the covers came off at the turn of the millennium, and it still looks fresh today. Yet to me, a good retro reproduction needs to offer more than looks. It has to capture the feel of the original, too, not just in terms of the interior, but also how it drives. The Mini nails both, with a charismatic cabin and go-kart-like handling. Sitting in one today, you struggle to believe it's the best part of 25 years old. Sure, it's bigger than its forebear, but it's dinky compared with today's super minis. If you want one, you'd better act fast because good ones are becoming harder and harder to find. Mercedes, SLR, McLaren, Sterling, Moss. For me, the 50s were the golden years for sports racing machines, and there's only one contender for the ultimate retro-inspired road car. The Mercedes SLR McLaren Sterling Moss is a wonderful homage, not just to one of our most storied racers, but also to the 300 SLR racing car he used to win the 1955 Mille Miglia, the Mercedes McLaren SLR Coupe. It's based on is a pretty awesome machine in its own right, but given the 50s speedster treatment, with no windscreen, twin rollover hoops, and side-exiting exhausts, it was transformed into a true work of art. Renault. An open goal is still a goal, so there's no shame in picking the very obvious new Renault 5 as the best retro car. The French firm has done a brilliant job of translating the classic R5's looks and unique design cues into a model fit for modern life, and it certainly teaches other brands a thing or two about successfully trading on their heritage. It's a design that makes you smile, which is something too few cars do these days, and Renault's bold color choices will help an already standout car shine even brighter when it arrives here early next year. Retro isn't always meant as a compliment, but with the 5, it's used with the utmost affection. It's a perfectly executed fusion of classic and modern design, and I can't wait for it to arrive. Citroën Dispatch H-Van. The last time you saw a Citroën H-Van, it was probably parked up at an event or shopping center with a barista or an artisan baker hanging out the side, peddling their wares. Old vans can be great for businesses like that, but reliability isn't going to be a strong point. However, the 2CV shop based in Warminster, Wiltshire, might just have the answer. It imports conversion kits from Italian firm Castellani that can transform Citroën's Berlingo, Dispatch, and Relay vans into retro homages to the old H, HG, HY, and Fourgonette models with bug-eyed headlights, a retro grille, and corrugated panels that recall the appearance of Citroën's traditional tin shed. They don't come cheap, but they're produced under license from Citroën and are as close as you can get to an official retro modern van today. Plymouth Prowler. If you're going to design a retro car, you want it to look the part. While the Plymouth Prowler is actually rather mundane to drive and filled with cheap and nasty plastics, nobody can deny that it stands out from the crowd. Those in the know can identify the Prowler straight away, despite the fact that production ended as much as 20 years ago. But even those with no clue what it is will find themselves unable to avert their eyes. Yes, the Plymouth is technically and dynamically a bit on the poor side, but just look at it. Ford GT. 20 years since the Ford GT's debut, I still have no idea how the firm managed to create something so visually similar to its 60s Le Mans legend. It had all the lines and features of the original racer, yet looked so brilliantly modern in its execution at the same time. The supercharged 5.5-liter V8 made a terrific noise, and the performance holds up against many of today's supercars. Its handling even earned the GT a spot in our sister title, Evo's Car of the Year shortlist in 2005. Prices have tripled since its launch, but there will never be anything like it again. The worst retro cars. Chrysler PT Cruiser. Chrysler's dabbling with retro design and hot rod culture created some almighty clangers, but few were as awful as the PT Cruiser. This hatchback wagon van hybrid was the result of the U.S. firm's desperate attempt to find itself a place in the 21st century after decades of uninspired and poorly built models. The genesis of this new way of thinking was seen in the 1989 Dodge Viper concept, a car that made all the Chrysler Group brands of the era want to make a change of their own. A few years after the success of the Viper, the Plymouth Prowler was introduced with a more overt hot rod aesthetic, one that was eventually picked up by Chrysler itself for the PT Cruiser, a new compact car that it hoped would sell in vast quantities, and indeed it did across both America and the rest of the world. But that didn't stop it from being a wholly wretched and quite tacky pastiche in plastic. GWM Ore 3, Funky Cat. You might wonder why, when the two cars look ostensibly so similar, I can rate the Mini so highly yet take such objection to the Aura 03, Ni Funky Cat. Well, probably the biggest issue for me is how the Aura tries to mash together so many iconic design into one without much success. There's undoubtedly some essence of the Mini at the front, mixed with bits of VW Beetle or even early Porsche 911. Yet from here it all goes to pot, and with an odd single-piece rear light bar and a bulbous back end, the overall styling is messy to say the least. The interior is clumsy too, with a fiddly infotainment system and compromised packaging. Plus, the EV's battery range isn't much to write home about either. Unfortunately, I suspect the Aura will go down as one of many early Chinese cars that didn't quite chime with European tastes. Dodge Kahuna. It wasn't even a production car, but the Dodge Kahuna left a long-lasting impression as a cynical retromobile designed with minimal thought other than grabbing a share of the headlines at the 2003 Chicago Motor Show. It's basically a hark-back surf wagon with some wood paneling off a 70s US station wagon down the side, but the Kahuna lacked the charm of a Volkswagen Type 2 or even an ID buzz, and just looked like a meek, narrow, doe-eyed oddball. Even the name sounded like a sniggering surfer jock joke and not a car to be taken seriously. The six-seat interior was borrowed from the Dodge Caravan MPV, sold here as the Chrysler Voyager, and it had a 2.4-liter petrol engine, as seen in various Chrysler models. It never even got close to being built, thankfully. Lamborghini Countach, LPI 800-4. If you're after an ultra-exclusive Lambo, the Italian maker is sure to oblige. It has produced hit after hit over the years and plenty of limited-run specials. But for me, the reimagined Countach is a huge miss. There's been nothing quite like the original Countach concept that was revealed at the Geneva Motor Show back in 1971. But this 50th anniversary reimagining fails to live up to its beauty, trying to transpose the first car's elegant shape to the Aventador Cian platform created an awkward-looking mess. It doesn't even have pop-up headlights. Only 112 were built, and despite costing more than $2 million apiece, they sold out in less than a week. I guess that proves that money really can't buy taste. David Brown Speedback GT. The Aston Martin DB5 is one of the most beautiful cars ever, which makes this gawping Frankenstein imitation all the more embarrassing. Created by David Brown Automotive, nothing to do with the former boss of Aston Martin, the Speedback GT tried to blend coach-built skills with modern tech. The end result is cringe-inducing. It isn't even an Aston. It's based on a Jaguar XKR with awful wheels. Fiat 500L. The original Fiat 500 is a tiny city car that oozes classic charm, and the brand managed to recapture this when it launched the first modern iteration in 2007. Unfortunately, 5 years later, the Italian company then decided that its retro-inspired small car styling would also look good on a chunky MPV. That was a big mistake. The result was the 500L, a hefty, bulbous machine that wasn't as practical as its rivals, nor anywhere near as good to drive or as chic as the proper 500. Volkswagen New Beetle. When Volkswagen wheeled out its Concept 1 homage to the original Beetle back in the mid-90s, I admit to being caught up in the hype that convinced VW to put the car into production in 1997. But in hindsight, I wish I'd been more critical. Car design should be innovative and intriguing, but we ended the last century distracted by play school-level pastiche models that really should have been an offense to good taste. Fiat 124 Spider. A car based on the Mazda MX-5 with Italian styling. In theory, I can't think of a formula that is more up my street. That's why I should adore the Fiat 124 Spider. But unfortunately, it has never quite sat right with me. Yes, it's great to drive, and it has some interesting details, but viewed as a whole, it all comes across as a bit half-hearted. Not enough effort was invested into making the 124 look and feel unique, and as such it ends up resembling a lazy MX-5 conversion, with new front and rear ends grafted on and Fiat badges thrown into a barely unchanged Mazda interior. I admit calling it the worst retro car ever is a bit harsh. I'd happily own one, but I do feel a bit let down by it. Hummer H2. Although America sometimes nails it when it creates retro-styled cars, it can also occasionally produce a pile of dog's mess, and that's exactly what happened when it inflicted the Hummer H2 upon us. The numbers are all wrong for a start. Despite having a hulking great V8, the scaled-down Humvee would lose a traffic light drag race to a Toyota Prius of the same era. It wouldn't top 100 mph. Fuel consumption was in the teens, if not worse, and it cost more than a BMW X5 at the time. Yes, there's an eccentric character to the H2 that some would find comical or even endearing these days. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big fan for a start. But to most of us, it's simply a garish symbol of brash, over-styled American excess. Chevrolet SSR. In an attempt to cash in on the retro boom, Chevrolet got to work creating the SSR, or Super Sport Roadster. Sure, America loves a pickup, and Chevy is no stranger to creating a good one. But a retro truck that was also a convertible hardtop roadster with design inspiration from the 40s was a bold move. Plus, despite its Marmite looks, the SSR was marketed via Motorsport, becoming the official pace car for the 2003 Indy 500 in a bid to capture the crowd's imagination. There were decent safety features and in-car kit, but it was expensive and not even GM's LS2 V8 engine could save it from being a flop. Which cars would you add to these lists? Tell us in the comments section below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are trying very hard for you.